Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about setting up SilverStripe with Docker Compose. The first thing you're going to need is PHP. It doesn't matter which version. In our container we'll use 8.3, but I have 7.3 installed, so if you have 7.3 or higher you should be fine. You'll also need Composer installed on your host machine, and you'll need Docker Desktop. We're doing this on Windows. And we're going to use this Composer Create project. If you're using a version of PHP less than 8.1, you'll likely need to specify the 5.2 version and then add this ignore platform requirements flag. And right here will be the name of our project, which I already have installed. Next, in our Composer JSON, we need to specify the PHP version for Composer to use. This will be used in our Composer container, and also when we run Composer on the host machine, it will ignore whatever version we have installed and just use whatever platform defined in this. Next, we will create a Docker Compose YAML file at the root of our project, and we will start with a services property and PHP. This will be our first container. We're going to use this Brett89 SilverStripe web image, and we'll define that in this image property. And then we're going to add some of the essential files for PHP to run as bind mounts in a volume property. That's going to be app, public, themes, and composer JSON. And to the right of this colon is what will be mounted onto the container, and the left is what we have on the host machine, that being Windows here. Since this is the FPM version of the image, we're going to have this running on port 9000. The left is the host machine, and again, the right is what the container will use. Next, we need to define some environment variables. This is similar to how you would do this with a .env file in something like XAMPP or Homestead. We're going to set the environment type to dev mode. We're going to use these database properties. We're going to have the default admin password and username set to admin and password. And this part up here will be where the root of our project is. Next, we're going to move on to our Nginx container. So this is just going to use the base Nginx image from Docker Hub. And the only thing this needs is the public volume, because that's where the index.php is going to live, and our Nginx conf is going to reference that. But we need to have an Nginx conf from a template, so we're going to create that now. So we're going to create this Docker files templates directory with mkdir p for allowing for subdirectories to be created simultaneously. So Docker files templates. This Docker files directory is where we could place any Docker files that we would use to create custom images, but for this video's sake we're only going to use images defined on Docker Hub. Next, we're going to create this nginx.conf.template, and I'm just going to paste this in. I'll probably leave a link in the description to this file, but the important part to note is the line 29 down here, the fast CGI pass. This is going to php:9000, and this PHP is actually the name of the service in our Docker Compose file. Then we're going to set this to port 80, which is the default HTTP port. Then we're going to set the Nginx host to docker-ss.localhost, and that value will get inserted here in the server name in our nginx.conf template. And we're going to make this depend on the PHP container. That way when we run Docker Compose up, it will wait for the PHP container to be up before starting the Nginx one. Then we're going to set up our Composer container using just the basic Composer image. All we need for this is the Composer JSON and an SS vendor named volume, which we'll get to in a second. This is going to be in the var www HTML directory, And the command that we're going to use is the composer update command. So I mentioned the SS vendor volume is a named volume. So we need to have this volumes property, and this is at the top level. So far everything has been under services, but here we need to come outside of this, make sure there's no indentation on this side, and put a volumes property, and then we can just have this SS vendor empty property here. So the way this is going to work is the composer container is going to run and it's going to install to the SS vendor named volume, and that's going to get shared and used by the PHP container, so we're going to need to put that there. Finally, we're going to set up our database, and it's going to be using the MariaDB image. The default port for that is 3306, and we're just going to define those ports the same way that we did for PHP, using 3306 colon 3306. The environment variables we need are MySQL root password, and this example is the same one that we set up here for our SS database password. And the MySQL database, which is the same SS sitedb database that we defined at the top in our PHP container, right here under SS database name. And we're also going to use another named volume so that way our database always persists. So we're going to need to put a DB data property here, right under our named volumes at the bottom here. Remember, this is top level. Alright, make sure you save your Docker Compose YAML file and have Docker Desktop open, and then in your terminal you're going to type docker compose up -d, and this D is for detach mode, that way it doesn't hang up our terminal. Okay, now in Docker Desktop you should see your application and all the containers it's using. And Composer just needs to finish running, and it looks like it's already done. You'll see the container icon go from green to gray when that's finished, and that means that it installed all of our dependencies. Okay, in our browser, we just need to type in docker-ss.localhost/dev-build, and remember this docker-ss.localhost is what we defined as our Nginx host. Now you may notice that it worked, but we have no styling here, and that's because the composer vendor expose typically fails within the container. So to work around that, we're going to install dependencies on our host machine too, and then copy those manually using the vendor expose copy method. So we're going to say composer update on our host machine. And remember, it shouldn't matter which version of PHP you actually have installed. It's going to run Composer as if you had whatever you define in here. Then we're going to remove the public resources. So you're going to type in rmrf public _ resources. And if you have a permission issue here, you can do a PowerShell as an administrator. A shortcut for that is Windows key plus X. And then you just press the A key and then say yes. Then you're going to navigate to the project, and I'm using git bash here, so this path is going to look a little different than what I need to type into PowerShell. That's going to be my cd c colon my user and then docker containers docker-ss. This tilde represents your user directory, so C users, my name here. So we're going to go here, and then we're going to rmdir dot / public resources. And then you may need to say yes to all of this. You can do that just by pressing enter. Now, this should be the only time you have to open PowerShell and run this as an administrator, but we can go back to our bash terminal here and say composer vendor-expose copy, and that's going to use the copy method instead of using symlinks, which Docker doesn't work so well with. So we need to actually copy the files out of our vendor directory to the public resources folder. And that should be about everything. If you refresh your browser, you should notice the dev build actually has some styling now. So let's go ahead and try and get into the admin. So we'll do our origin/admin, and we'll type in admin and example, I think is what we set. Or no, we set password for the CMS, examples for our database. And yeah, we should have a working SilverStripe site now. And if we were to stop our container, let's just see, our application with all of our containers, this shouldn't work anymore. Yeah, so you can press start and stop on this. Every time you press start though, it's going to try to run the composer container again, which will try to reinstall dependencies. It will update any if there are updates available, but there's none now, so it quit pretty early. But we could refresh this and our site should be back up and running. That's the end of this video. I think I'll do one where we can set up a PHP admin container, but I'll catch you then.